I suppose there's no point doing a big preamble. Everybody knows the crack. We are the recording and mixing engineers for AMPS Studio. My name is Craig Sheridan, and joining me today is Séan McDonald. This is the AMPS Studio podcast, and this month we are making great preparations to get back into the studio space. So in this episode, we'll be talking about loads of things, but moving back into the space, how we're going to do that, some of the training that's coming in on AMPS, and some of the things that's been keeping us going now that we're moving from lockdown back into something close to what we used to have or called normal.
Yeah, and we also have a few questions sent in by some people watching some of the previous episodes there, so we'll get answering those too.
Yep. This one is going out slightly later than normal, purely because we were making sure that the space was going to be treated before we would give out any information. So straight off the bat, I suppose, best get this information out of the way. We had a space survey done, and we are totally fine to host up to 4 people in our control room, where I'm sitting right now, and then in our live space, which you can see through the window at the back there. Way in there, so we can have up to 4 people in both rooms. Now the 4 people, the 4th person in this room also, well, obviously includes the engineer. So if there's a 5-piece band, then between the 2 rooms we can accommodate us all, but we've also got a big hall space outside that we can rotate. It's kind of a standard affair, as you would be expecting these days. You come in up the stairs, you sanitize your hands as you come in, everybody comes in, kind of stays a metre apart, and we can accommodate that in the space. There's the recording in there, we record in here, everything's sweet. We're also opening for rehearsals again then, and as part of the rehearsals, Sean's going to be running that anyway, so anyone who needs to book in some practice space, get in touch with Sean. There'll be links underneath here about how you can do that. And we can accommodate again up to 4 people in the rehearsal space, and on each of the microphones we have disposable mic covers that we can get rid of after you've been singing and spitting and biting and whatever people do on microphones when we're not watching. After every recording session and after every practice session, then obviously the gear and the equipment gets wiped down, and that just adds a wee bit more time onto the whole scenario. But it's the safest way to operate, and we'd rather keep people healthy and keep ourselves healthy, so we can continue to move on. Sean, have you got anything to add about that?
Not really. There's a bit of a change to the rates for the rehearsal space. So anyone looking to book in, it is £30 for a 3-hour session. So just again, anyone looking to use the rehearsal space, just get in touch, and we'll book you in for a wee slot.
Excellent. And that's open 7 days a week, from 10 in the morning until 10 during the week, I think it is. Is that right?
No, well, until 9 during the week.
Okay. Yeah. And then is it 6 on Saturday, Sunday?
5. Just
5. Okay, yes. So obviously I'm the one that gets locked in a lot. And you can't get locked in all night. That's just not. This place is haunted upon. So moving on then, what have you been doing with yourself since our last podcast, Sean?
Quite a lot, actually. It's been quite a busy month for me, and personally, I've been getting back into the live music scene, which has been very strange the last few weeks. So getting back, just doing the bar gigs and doing the cover stuff, but being well protected. That's something obviously a sign of the times, and very positive to see some of the measures that some of the bars are taking to protect performers. Mm-hmm. And it's everything's a bit up in the air at the moment, so nobody really knows what the real legalities and stuff of live performances and stuff is. But there's a sort of consensus that 1- and 2-piece performers and DJs and stuff is okay as long as the audience is socially distant.
Yeah.
And one measure that really surprised me that one of the bars took was they set us up on the stage. And then once we got up there, they covered all 3 sides of the stage with these big plastic coverings. You ever see that scene in the Blues Brothers where they've got the chicken wire covering the stage? It was like that, but only protecting us from people spitting at us or whatever.
No one's throwing drinks in that scenario because they're waiting 40 minutes for the pint to be delivered.
I know, they don't want to be getting that away. But it's good to see some of the bars taking that measures to protect performers. Obviously it's just a bit strange,
Yes.
And you're thinking to yourself and doing all the normal things of shouting out, right, let's get up and dance for this one, and then you're going, oh no, don't actually do that. grab a person next to you and have a wee, and you're like, no, that's not on.
I've been lucky enough to be DJing the past few weeks, I think the past 3 weeks, and it's the same idea where we're set up in a smoking area. Most of my DJ gigs seem to be outside, Sean. My first proper paying gig was outside too, and I thought, well, this is a nice change, and it's been like I've been DJing outside ever since. But it's been really good to be outside. People love being outside, and I'm DJing in Jailhouse predominantly, and they have the smoking area, but there's maybe only 6 tables that could hold a maximum of 6 people. But from Lower North Street all the way through to Ann Street, there's Joy's Entry that runs the whole way down there, and there's benches the whole way down throughout. So it's always full of people. People want to be out and be amongst it. So most of the smokers actually stay in the entry, and most of the people who are down for something a bit more social stay in the space. But it is a very strange time, but people still want to be out and be social. So I suppose it's very nice to see, even when people are interacting with each other, even when they've had some drinks. Obviously they can't drink at the same rate, but they're still giving each other space and accommodating each other, getting past and being very civil that way. So it's quite pleasant. It's quite nice. The bank holiday weekend is going to be interesting. I'm not quite sure what the measures are, because I remember last weekend there was the big announcement. We're recording this just before the bank holiday weekend, that we might have to slow things down again. I don't know how practical that's going to be over a bank holiday weekend, but we'll find out, I'm sure. Have you got gigs on this weekend?
I do. I'm playing this Sunday. So we've got a wee residency up in the bar in West Belfast. So this will be the 3rd week of 4 that we're in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, same as usual. I'm looking forward to it, and sort of it's been dead on. But yeah, things are getting a bit uncertain now, aren't they? About cases on the rise again and things like that. So we'll have to just keep our ear to the ground and see how things are going. But there's no real direction to say, like, black and white, this is okay and this isn't okay. So
yeah. And it's just that uncertainty that makes things stressful, because you don't know. Even if we're booked to do gigs, then you can't exactly get up the next morning and do a mixing session or a coaching session, because your ears are still tired from the night before. So it's just it seems strange trying to plan that time. But that's why we kind of, even in the past podcast, we were saying, there's the kind of 2-week turnaround for mixes that gives you time, your ears can recover, you can get back into the mix again anyway. So if there's any recording projects, or I think what's been very common is that a lot of people have been streaming, which seems to have died down of late, but there's still a lot of people streaming gigs and streaming performances. And I suppose one of the things that people never really do after that is maybe even compile them into like a show reel for themselves. Sometimes these things are casually done. But that's certainly something that we can help you with if you want to get in touch about how you take those recordings and put them onto one cohesive album. I say album, I mean collection. So that at least you can document that, whether you want to release that as a cover series or whether you want to release that as a series of gigs. There's always ways that we can archive that and make them sound as good as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a criticism of a lot of performers, is that when you get something done, you want to just put it all out at the one time. So even with those live shows and stuff, you could very easily be splitting those up and putting them up as clips on YouTube. But it's also like when people get photo shoots done, they put up the whole album of photos instead of using one for one release, and then so it's, but definitely that is a tip to maybe split up all those long pieces of content that you've got.
Yep. Speaking of doing things over a longer time, one of the things that keep me busy is I've been actively trying to write a load of sketches of a morning, and timing it myself that, giving myself 20 minutes, half hour to come up with a musical idea, and then do this every single morning so that my rate of getting ideas out is much quicker. And I've reduced my options, and I've got kind of set up like a virtual band. So this is going to be the drum sounds I use, these are going to be the synth sounds I use, and I'm knocking out ideas. And I've been doing it for 3 months, maybe 9 weeks, and it is starting to yield some very good results. I'm now in the process of taking those sketches and make them into full songs. But I was working with a client who has been engaging with me for a long time, maybe since the very start of lockdown, actually. And he's working through a 6-week release schedule. So the idea was he was supposed to go on to a retreat and he was going to be networking with these people on a treat, and he wanted to have an EP finished for that. So we thought, well, do you know what? Let's use that same date and let's go for 6 weeks and let's get the tracks finished and get them out in 6 weeks. And having that cut-off date and that accountability has stepped him up into a gear that I've never seen him operate in before. It's really, really encouraging. Yeah. So I'm running this as a pilot idea to see how practical that is. That over a very fixed time with a very certain outcome, how practical is that? But it's also inspired me to kind of keep up with him too. So I've got a bunch of these sketches, and I'm thinking, if I'm coaching him in 6 weeks, maybe I should follow those same instructions. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at for this week. It's going to be keeping me busy, just organising those, choosing my favourites, and then deciding how I move on with those. You were saying that you have a release just out, is that correct?
Yeah, so with the act that I play around the bars with, predominantly doing covers, myself and Matt, the guy I had to play with, we decided to show each other a few of our ideas for songs recently, and we just collaborated a few months ago before lockdown and just recording a single, and it had been in the background obviously because of lockdown for a long time, and there was a few bits to add, and slowly but surely, we just says, right, we'll try and do this remotely, and we're sending things back and forward to each other, and I managed to piece together the thing just before lockdown finished. So if it was 2 weeks later, we would have been able to actually get together and do it properly in one session. But managed to fancy get that all mixed together, and got it put out there 2 weeks ago. So that was brilliant to get that. So it's called Closer, and the band's called I. And so if you want to give it AYE, I. So if you want to give that a wee listen on Spotify, go on ahead.
We should probably link that, and then you can get that directly off the link that you're watching this from. Yeah. Awesome. And are you once again the songwriter, recording engineer, producer, mixer?
Matt wrote the song, but I recorded the guitars and sang on it with Matt, and then we got two of our friends, Chris Anderson and James Downey, in to record the drums, the bass, and the keys for it. So and do a bit of backing vocals. So yeah, real good collaborative effort. Like,
happy days. It's nice to be productive again, isn't it?
Big time.
So that moves us very nicely, Sean, onto what's been inspiring you.
Yeah, I think putting that out really has been a great motivator, because and it's also been a weird experience because never released anything obviously during a global pandemic, and
few have, mate.
And you're used to the whole build up of a release schedule of sending things out and handling the actual release of the song itself with trying to promote a launch gig or whatever else, and the stress of both of those. And I found actually not having the added pressure of having a show to run at the same time actually helped boost the song a bit more. You put a lot more effort, and because we're a small outfit of an act, so we're only doing this, the two of us, so we were able to focus a lot more on put a lot more of our man hours into actually pushing the song on social media, making a wee compilation of clips of us in the studio and putting that out as a video. We've done a wee live stream gig and different wee things like that, and we were able to send it to more outlets and stuff, and torture people to give us reviews. So like, and
have you written it? Have you written it?
Well, so yeah, and like that, it was strange, but actually quite productive on the side of numbers wise of getting more people engaged with it.
Yeah, excellent. Do you think that if what would be required to put a show on and do all that, would you just need someone else to organise the show?
I think a lot of local bands need to consider that option as well, of maybe not doing a show to release it at the same time, because I think we're taking cues from bigger acts
Mm-hmm.
who have
Bigger
the
support
team
networks.
and and the resources to be able to do that. But
Yeah.
you know, when you're, you know, a lot of bands, you know, it's one person doing a lot of the work.
Yeah.
So like to be able to promote the thing, the and also be promoting and organizing a show at the same time and a whole tour sometimes,
Yeah.
like
It's a lot.
it's not really the best idea.
Mm-hmm. Which actually reminds me of this podcast on. In the first few episodes, obviously, we were figuring out our way and I was doing everything. But in this episode, Sean's going to be editing. So,
Yeah. Actually, I actually put in some weight for once, Craig.
And we've drafted in a few helpers along the way too. So Jack McGarry is going to be helping us post it through the socials. And we have Luke lined up too, who we haven't assigned a role yet. But I know he's been in the background kind of waiting to jump on it as soon as he can get out of the house. So yes, it's Sal and I had the same conversation just last week about sometimes you have to learn to delegate and to give these things to someone else and let them develop, and then you know are free then to do other things. So I thought, okay, let's do the same thing and let's kind of pass off some of these jobs and see how we get on. So I'm very excited to see how the edit turns out. So, but speaking of things organised and gigs, we were very fortunate to be involved with the Villa gig up in Clonard Monastery. It was my first time in the monastery, and it's an absolutely gorgeous building. Some of the artwork in there and just even the ambience in the place is absolutely stunning. We rolled up with 2 massive big Mackies and 2 subs and a stack of microphones to record an acoustic gig. I think it's a fair way to say it. Obviously everything was still mic'd and recorded that way, but it was a location recording and we had turned up and it was the first one that we had done since lockdown. And I have to say, I was very nervous about it, Sean. How were you when you got the call through for the job?
I thought it was a big undertaking,
Yeah.
and it reminded me of a job I had done previously in a church, on the Shankill, and we had recorded a choir there with like a small string ensemble, and that was a really difficult job. That ended up the mix process ended up lasting a couple of months. So I thought I was getting into something of that magnitude again, but only with a much stricter deadline.
Yeah.
So, but I have to say, the whole project turned out very successful, and it would, I think, us, the crew, the musicians, and the organisers worked that thing out very professionally.
Yeah, shout out to Farrell Clark who helped us with mobility issues that day. He got us there about with big speakers. It was very, very refreshing to work with musicians of that caliber, and to turn up, and once we had set up and we had done our job, just give them the space to be the musicians that they are. And it was a treat to listen to the music as well. Having the recording done too was a wee bit stressful because obviously it's alright to mix for the environment you're in, but once we took that back and looked at it again, the performances were so consistent that it made the job much easier to work with. So I'm actually going to write a blog post off the back of that about the lessons that I learned off the back of that, and I'll post that up on Giving Hands and like that through the rest of these two. But it was a very great learning experience, and to be honest, I think the nerves were because, like you were saying, it's a high profile gig, there's quicker turnaround time, it had to work. But when we got there, as soon as we got into action, all them nerves dropped off, and it was a very enjoyable experience to be there and to be privileged to be part of that. And I suppose that reflects into anything that you're doing creatively. Most of the nerves and most of that stress are come from the uncertainty, but once you get there and get your teeth into it, all the activity takes away from the tension of that.
Yeah. And I think experience as well sort of helps in that scenario where you know that you have all the bases covered.
Oh yeah.
You know, like everything is okay, and you always have that niggling thing of, you know, have I missed something? Like, but I think if you are assured of yourself and think that, you know, I know that everything is fine here, then you're able to enjoy the experience a lot more, and just give the musicians that platform just to do what they do. And when we were working with such professionals, they made our job a lot easier.
Yep. We'll stick a link to the YouTube broadcast of that Clonard event in the link here if you fancy checking it out too. It was a lovely thing to be involved in, and I'm very grateful that we were called in to do it. Was there anything that you learned from that session, Sean, that you either got confirmed or you discovered you were doing it right, or you done for the first time that worked out very well?
I think one of the lessons, one of the things that were done that I think was very helpful. It didn't end up being used in the end, but was a very smart idea. Was to have backup recordings, solutions, because we were recording that in a live scenario. There was a film crew and stuff there. Everything was, well, there was a few times we had to do retakes of things, but we were working with a strict schedule, of bands had to be in and away very quickly in certain time slots. So there wasn't a lot of room for doing things over, or, so we had to ensure that if something went down on the recording end of things, that we had a few backups there to save us. And I think one of the things was we had a wee Tascam multi-track recorder coming out of one of the Séans, just recording out of the desk. And so I thought that was something useful to have, even though the recordings ended up turning out fine anyway. We had that as a backup in case anything were to happen.
Yep, certainly. Though the backup recorder recorded what comes off the desk at the time, which is very much mixed for the room. So although it would have sounded grand, having the multi-track there and being able to mix those independently in a more controlled environment means that they translate it much better. And you have to give a shout out to Brendan and the video team too, because what they put together was very slick looking. The quality of the recording was fantastic, and the sync on the sound was perfect. Even watching it back, it was such a kind of fluid thing that you kind of forget of how long that recording took and how sectioned it was. It seemed very natural and very flowing. So shout out to them, lads. One of the things that I suppose I learned was that recording for TV, which is what different recording for live, is that you do have that extra 20 minutes to make sure that things are set up right before the tapes roll. And so that was very lovely to be more engaged and talk with the artist, instead of maybe at a live scenario where you've got a different number of bands coming in and things have to be kind of set up and adapted to quite quickly. We had the ability to line check and to make sure that the artists were happy with what they were hearing before any audience would receive that broadcast. So that was very refreshing. It was very nice.
It was a privilege that we had as a result of not having an audience there, was that we had a much quicker line of communication with the artist to just be able to quickly say, is this okay, without having to go back and forward or set up a talkback mic or anything. So,
and of course that would be the privilege of having, if you were doing a show with a band and you were the regular engineer and you did sound check in the afternoon and then the show in the evening, that's grand. But a lot of events locally don't really work like that, and especially for up and coming bands where people kind of turn up 10 minutes before they're supposed to be on stage and you have to adapt to what's going on there. So it was lovely to be in that environment where we had the time, we had the communication, and I think off the back of that then it was a much more enjoyable experience. It was definitely more enjoyable to watch it back. It was fun to share stories about how those things came about, but I thought each of the artists were very engaging anyway and very good to listen to.
I tell you what I won't miss though, those standing on those marble floors for 9 hours. That wasn't enjoying. God, my legs would come the next day.
I felt like an old man. My hips sore, and they're like, listen to you. Right, so that moves on then. So getting a chance to be out in Clonard again, fantastic experience doing some live sound stuff. DJing and performing at the weekend. It's nice to get out and be amongst actual humans again. And we obviously are in the recording space, so this week we've been testing out the equipment and we've had some very talented local younger performers in, just testing out the space and making sure everything's sweet. So we did a couple of recordings in just to make sure that the equipment's all working again fine, and it's lovely to be in and have humans to interact with and get recording on. So yesterday I had a few sessions on and it was nice just to work through that and refine that rate, because no matter what, when you're away for something for 12 weeks you're going to get a bit rustier at it. So it was nice to come in and refresh myself, and now we're moving forward with how do we book clients in. So if you're interested in coming into the space, whether that be for mixing in this controlled environment or recording in the space behind us through our Pro Tools HD rig, then by all means get in touch. There's contact details all over the links here that you can reach out to us. One of the things that we wanted to talk about was our free plugin, and I had said to Séan, I think it was last week, that I'd seen a link that Waves were giving away MV2, Max Volume 2, which is a 2-slider plugin that's fantastic for bringing up really quiet sounds. But when I went to look for the link this morning, the internet was confused. I didn't know what it was talking about. So I'm not sure if that's going to be available by the time this goes out. So instead of that, we're going to highlight a free app. It's not necessarily a plugin, but an app for your phone that is absolutely essential, in my opinion, if you're setting up any kind of mixing space. Now, we've got a question in from John Buller about setting up studio spaces and about listening environments at home, and this is going to be it'll meet both of those things. So John had asked about setting up a mixing environment and how to hear that, and the one thing that's very important is your speaker position. So on the KRK app, which is an app that comes for the generation 4 of their speakers, you can sync it with your speaker, and it does all sorts of fancy inter technology. However, it works with any set of speakers. There's a couple of different features on this thing. The first thing you can do is load it up, and it'll tell you how much volume is coming out of each speaker. So just because you set your speaker set on 10 on both speakers doesn't mean that they're coming out at the same volume. So the left one may be 3 decibels louder than the right one, and that kind of throws off your perception about which one's louder or how your panel works, or your room may be adding in something different to that too. So this is a really good utility to make sure the sound coming out of each speakers is the same frequency content and the same volume. It also has, is it called the gyrometer, where it tells you kind of which angle things are sitting at. The way it works, you put it on top of your speaker is facing the back wall. Sorry, my screen's in reverse, so this is a little bit strange for me. You're facing the back wall, and then it tells you to tilt it by 30 degrees.
It's like 3D here, Craig.
I know, it's amazing. So it allows you then to put things into, or put you into the sweet spot. So that puts you into the mixing sweet spot. So 30 degrees in, left and right, puts you in the sweet spot. It means you can hear most accurately the sound coming off the speakers. It also, there's got pink noise in there, so you can measure your levels and measure the sound decibels. It's a very, very useful app, and I would advise everyone to get it. If you Google it on the Play Store, if you Google it on the App Store, if you're on Mac, you'll be able to download it for free. We'll put a wee video of me scrolling through it there, so and a link below. It's very useful for anyone setting up a mixing space, no matter if you're at home or even if you're in a public space that's accessible to the public. Have you any free plugins that you've come across of late, Séan, that are worth note?
Not really, Craig. Actually, I haven't been on the hunt in the last wee while. I've been just using what I have.
Yes, it's very interesting too, because at a certain point you stop looking for free plugins and you start looking for plugins that do a good job. Does that make sense? So like once you get a good set of strong tools, there's a greater need in you to learn how to use those tools properly than to get new tools. And I think that's that's how you know you've kind of matured from someone who's messing about with audio to someone who wants to work and craft and develop a skill in that. And that's why I was thinking if the Waves MV2 link, and if we can't find it, we'll include it. But that's a very useful tool. It's especially good on reverb for the kind of quiet end of a reverb tail. You can just increase the low level volume, which makes it much more forward and much more perceivable in a mix. It's a very useful plugin that way. So that's the KRK app and MV2. MV2, of course, is generally about $30 on Wavesite. So if you are interested, by all means, download that one, check that out. And if it's free, happy days, and we'll share the link. So moving on then, Séan, we've done the overcoming. Have we done what's inspiring you? Have I asked you that yet?
We've done that, but we haven't answered our other question from viewer, which was what makes a good mix?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So, what way would you answer that one?
Well, this is an interesting one. I'm going to rephrase the question a bit to what makes a mix interesting for me, because I think that's a good place to start. Anytime you're making quality or value adjustments, you have to qualify who's making the judgment in the first place to make it important. So for me, I've heard a lot of good functioning mixes that do a job very well, but are maybe a wee bit bland, a wee bit kind of uninteresting. And I've heard a lot of really raucous and rough sounding mixes that just contain a sense of energy that's very engaging. So a good mix isn't necessarily a clean mix. I think that's the point I'm making with that. Um, it isn't necessarily something that is clinical and precise. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of finesse in that as a mixing engineer if you can get things to sound open and wide and transparent. But I think it was Royal Blood. The first time I heard Royal Blood, it was like the White Stripes on steroids. It was like, listen to all this. But there wasn't a lot going on. It was very thrashy and it had loads of energy.
Yeah.
It may also have been the headphones that I was listening to at the time too, but when the mix translated, it didn't translate as clean, it didn't translate as precise, it translated as energetic and raucous and aggressive. Mm-hmm. So a good mix, I suppose, is a mix that supports the story narrative, whatever that be. If that's about aggression or lust or anger or frustration, then the mix has to represent the message of the song. And sometimes if you're making techno, there's no necessarily message in the song, it's just aggressive sounding time. But the mix has to serve what's going on in the story of that song for me. Does that make sense? Was that a bunch of words?
No, here I like that one. I think for me, a good mix comes from a consensus. And what I mean by that is often enough in a project you're working with at least, two other people, or well, even sometimes not. But I think showing the mix to as many people, whose ears you trust as possible is, what's going to get the best mix out of you, and taking that, their opinions on board. Because if the vast majority of people are listening to that mix and saying, yeah, it's a good mix there, or if they've given you feedback before on it, and then you send them it back and they say, yeah, that's more like it, and you send it to a couple more people, democracy. If enough people are saying, yeah, that's sounding great, I like the mix, then that there's your answer. It must be doing something right.
I understand that, but my resistance to that one is my mother has never heard a song and thought, I love that mix. So, do you know what I mean? So, if you send it to people, it needs to be people who are qualified to listen to the mix as a what's wrong with my mix scenario. And it's better to do that with like kind of 2 or 3 trusted people than it is to kind of send it out to a committee. Because anything by committee generally turns out to be, what's the word? A kind of a compensation where everyone gets a wee bit of what they want instead of there being a kind of one decision. But I think you're right. I think having trusted ears is very important. I think having a good communication with the person who wants the track mixed is part of that. If you're mixing as a mixer for a client, I think that the biggest mistake you can make is running clean through and making it sound as awesome as you can and setting it off and expecting that client to be as in love with it as you are, because there's a bit of ego involved in it when you're doing it. You're like, yes, I've got this to sound awesome and they're gonna love this. Send it off, they're like, that's not close to our brief, and then you used to start again. So it's the case of it's always about the communication, which is probably why it makes it a bit difficult for people to mix their own stuff too, because there's a couple of really top level decisions that need made about what's the sound, what's the genre, what's your intent, what are you going for? And sometimes they aren't made by bands until they're forced to make it. And sometimes that's not even conversations that come up during the songwriting. Like, how do we approach the mix here? It's not part of the songwriting, So it's a different mind frame to be in, and there's a different outcome from that creative process. So what makes a good mix is kind of serving the song, and it's the same with songwriting too. What's the message of the song? And that's why you could write a song idea, but ultimately you could develop it and add more instrumentation and make it bigger for the sake of it. But if you're serving the narrative of the song, you're always going to be increasing the quality of the storytelling. I think that's where I'm at. Would that sound daft? Did that sound
no? Oh yeah, absolutely. Serve the song.
Yep.
And that even goes for performing as well. You get guitarists and drummers who like to embellish every bit of space that they can, but it sometimes best to hold back and just listen to what the song needs. There's a cracking video on YouTube of this drummer who's taken like a workshop, and or like a master class on drumming, and he talks about the genius of Ringo Starr, and everybody starts laughing because he's typically not known as one of the best drummers in the world, but he says no, Ringo Starr wasn't the most technical drummer in the world, but he served every song perfectly. He wasn't always playing; he played what he needed to.
Yeah.
And the way he demonstrates that is fantastic. I don't know the name of it, but search that up on YouTube. It's a fantastic clip.
If you can find it, stick the link in below, sure, and we can all show that one.
Yeah.
Yes, I think drummers are probably my first finger pointing victim when it comes to people who fill in maybe unnecessary space. And I think it's because drummers want to they've only got things to hit. Sorry, drummers, but sometimes then they put in extra rolls and extra bits that don't really need to be there. And that sometimes that might be nerve, sometimes it might be just pure energy and they can't wait to go. And sometimes it might just be the fact that I would imagine as a drummer you've only got certain places that you can really let go, and really give it your all. And having an opportunity to record that, you want to peacock as much as possible. But sometimes it takes a lesser performance in order to serve the song that way. Maybe I'm wrong. Drummers, get back to me. What do you think? Is it necessary to have a snare roll every 8 bars? Does every tom need to be hit on the roll? Let me know how that works out. I'm not a drummer, but help educate me. So I think that's coming close to about all we've got for this week, this month. Sorry, Séan, have you anything further to
add? No, just go and like the AMPS Studio socials. Follow us on there, and give a listen to Radio YNP. And this will be broadcasting on the station, and check out some of the other content we have on over there.
Yep, thanks very much. Thanks for staying with us to the end. All the links for the shows are going to be underneath. Links to the previous shows are going to be underneath. And we'll catch you again. Of course, remember, we're on Facebook, AMPS Studio. Join the podcast group, get involved with any discussion that's going on there. And let us know what you think of this episode. Are any of our opinions completely off the wall? Watch out, drummers. Or are we bang on what we say? It's be interesting to hear what you're saying. So until next month, I'm Craig Sheridan. This is with Sean McDonald. This is the AMPS Studio podcast.